in really good hands today with Zoe and Sammy. Zoe is our conservation science manager, and some of you may know her already. She's leading our field work for the Border Wildlife Study, and she's going to be your great point of contact for training resources, learning how you can volunteer with Sky Island Alliance even during the pandemic. We've come up with a number of creative ways, I think, to keep all of us engaged in this important conservation work. And also Sammy Hammer, who is our spring specialist. And she'll be talking today specifically about how you can get to springs, how you can find more information about where to go and find springs on the landscape. And then we'll be leading the information session on Monday night. So today, you will be in mute. That will be the default for everyone who's with us today. I'll ask that you can please just type any questions as they occur to you into the chat function. I will be watching those as Zoe and Sammy are speaking, and we're going to pause the presentation at different times and open it up to questions. And I will relay the questions that you're typing in to the chat box to our presenters. So please do that. Don't feel like you need to hold them till the end. And we're doing this session in two parts. The first one is going to be an overview with pauses for questions, but it's really about what is the survey, what are we trying to answer here, and really the high level of why we want to understand this information. And then we're going to take a pause towards the end, and we'll answer more technological questions. So if you want to actually try to download the app onto your phone or tablet and ask any questions you have about how to do that, we're going to save that more technical question and answer section till the very end. But certainly earlier during today's coffee break, if you have questions about why we're looking at different plant species or how to do certain measurements, those are things, definitely let us know what your questions are and we're happy to explain more. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it off to Zoe, and she's going to be sharing screen. And again, welcome everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to have you here today as we're ready to launch our new Spring Seeker, which I'm sure you guys are eagerly awaiting as well. So as Emily said, today's agenda is it's going to be kind of in 5 parts. So we're going to start by going over the Spring Seeker basics, so kind of just an introduction. And then the second part is going to be, I'll be reviewing how to use the survey in the field. And this is going to be the bulk of the presentation to how to accurately use the Spring Seeker. Third, we'll mention some different training resources that we have for all of you. And I'll give a brief explanation of what is available, but all of this is on our website and can be accessed later. So don't worry about trying to take any notes or anything right now. You'll be able to access this all. Fourth, we'll have Sammy talking about choosing the spring that you'll actually be going out to survey. So some navigation tips and safety as well. And then finally, for those who are interested and want to do the download and install together, we'll do that at the end, and that's optional. So as Emily said, the purpose of today's survey introduction is to make sure we're all on the same page about what we're surveying for. I'm going to pause after each of these 5 sections and let Emily see any questions that you guys have in the chat, so just type those in there. And any technological questions will really be at the end, so we'll try to focus on the content going forward. So to start with Spring Seeker basics, so a little bit of review for those of you that did attend last week's Spring 101 presentation. So springs are very important. They're places where groundwater is exposed, and it can bring water from the water table or the aquifer. They are especially important in the Sky Island region, as we know, because of lack of other perennial water sources. So they're important for that water, for wildlife, and specifically for riparian species and some spring endemic species as well. So yeah, that's just a brief overview. We have that last week's recording up on the website if you would like to really get in depth and learn more about springs. Work with springs has been integral throughout the history of Sky Island and the work we've done protecting the region for many years. And in the last 8 years of volunteering spring surveys led by our staff, we've surveyed about 350 springs, which is pretty impressive. But since there are over 3,000 springs in the region, we really need your help getting to the other 90% of springs in a timely fashion, which is why we've developed this new Spring Seeker application. So what is the Spring Seeker? It is a mobile survey app that you can use while you're already out hiking and in the woods and come across a spring. It is bilingual, so it's in English and Spanish, which will be great because a lot of the springs we want to get to are also on the Mexican side of the Sky Island region. And these data will help us understand the condition of springs right now in our region, and will be very important in using them for water rights validation in the future, and how we can prioritize our own conservation projects as well. So it's especially timely right now because it is a socially distant, safe volunteering opportunity. So this is something you can do by yourself. We always recommend going with a pair or with a friend, but you can keep that, maintain that distance. So it's safe, fun, independent data collection that are really important. And for us, it's a great opportunity to reconnect with all of you, the fabulous volunteers that we have. Also, I want to say now is especially a great time in dry summer and in summer in general for us to be getting this data of springs. So before I move on, I want to pause, see if there are any questions about springs or where to find any of those resources.
Yeah, Zoe, we do have one question, and it might be one that Sammy can help us answer, but a question's come in about whether we include Tinajas in the categories of spring. Noah is noting that in some cases, the spring itself may be unremarkable, but water pools somewhere downstream.
I'll defer to Sammy for that one.
Yeah, I can answer that. So Tinajas aren't on a lot of maps as springs, so we don't have them mapped as points already very much. But we definitely do, they found through the surveys and work in Saguaro National Park that a lot of Tinajas are actually fed by groundwater. So that is something that if you can help us gather data on those spots, that would be really great. So we do want to include any water source, but we're just kind of focusing on springs, and Tinajas really are probably springs most of the time.
Okay, great, thank you. Looks like that's the only question right now, Zoe.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to how to actually accurately and use the survey in the field. So we have designed this Spring Seeker to be pretty user-friendly and intuitive, but we want to focus a little bit on the content today and see if there are any questions before everyone gets started. So first, what you'll have to do to use this is you'll have to download and access both the application that we use and the survey. So I just want to talk about the difference here. So the application that we're utilizing is called Survey 123 for ArcGIS. So that's the application you will have to download to your cell phone or tablet. Either is fine, that you'll be bringing to the field. So you'll find that in your app store on either one of those. And then the actual survey that we'll be using in there is the Spring Seeker survey from Sky Island Alliance. And that you can get to, I put the link here, so you can either type that in your browser or from the phone or tablet, you can go to our website and just click on the link there. But that'll be done on the phone or tablet and not the computer. So both of these will have to be done before you go to the field while you have internet or cell phone signal. And then once you're in the field, you'll just easily open up the application. Under my surveys, you'll see that Spring Seeker survey right there, and that's how you'll get going. So as I mentioned, stick around at the end if you want to download this together. If anyone has that smartphone and is ready to go, you can follow the links that Emily will copy into our chat box to our Spring Seeker page and start on your phone. You can go ahead and download that, but we'll do it at the end as well. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the survey now and talk about what's actually in there. So first we start with just basic information. So your name, email, the date of your visit, which will be automatically populated. Site ID is going to be an optional question if you know the site ID of the spring you're going to. And Samuel will talk about that a little bit more later, and that depends which spring you're going to. For the location, this will automatically populate. And this doesn't matter when you're at the spring, your phone or your tablet Without cell phone signal, we'll be getting fixes from satellites through your GPS, so that will populate no matter what. If you do know the location really well and the dropped pin doesn't seem to be accurate, you can move it around. But yeah, best case scenario is just leaving that pin where it collects the GPS fix. And any of this can also be updated later once you get home. So next up are going to be photos. So the first one I want to talk about is the main representative photo. That's the first photo you'll take. And that's a photo that will include water, vegetation, and immediate surroundings. So we like to think of it as the one photo that you would show to someone else to show them what the spring was like and what your visit was like. So you'll see on the right-hand side, those are two examples of that perfect representative photo. On the left is just a spring seeker in the field taking that photo. It's a little bit hidden, but you'll see he did put his backpack out, which is really helpful in showing us, giving us a relative size comparison. So we definitely recommend putting a backpack or a water bottle, whatever you have out there. And as you'll see here on the left, you just click on that camera icon and you can take a camera without leaving the app. Files is in case when you first got to the spring and were hiking around, you took some photos and now you want to go back up and choose to upload them there. You can get them from your photo library. So that's the representative photo. There'll just be one photo. There's some additional photos here, and in all of these, you'll see there's short descriptions on how to take them in the app that kind of walk you through the process. So some of these might be the spring source. So that's usually walking up to the furthest uphill or upstream water. And in a more developed site, it might be in a closed concrete box like this. So here's another example of placing your backpack for relative size comparison, backing up 10 feet and taking the photo. The second one is the largest pool. So if there is standing water within 100 yards, you'll find that, again, place your backpack if you can, back up 10 feet and take that photo. And then finally over here is a vegetation photo, which is shows the area that is changed by the presence of water. So you can kind of see that the species will be different in the area. I'll talk a little bit more about that further on. And there's also some spots for optional photos as well. So if the site is really big and heterogeneous, you might want to throw in another photo or two, or some sites might have 2 spring boxes or something like that, or multiple tanks. So you can always put some extra photos in those optional slots. Okay, so next up is the water source. So this we want to know, is the water source wet today? Which you can tell just by looking at moisture, either standing water or moisture in the soil. And then if you do know the source, if you know the source well and you've been there before, you can tell us about the reliability, or is it wet all year round or not? And then finally, you'll want to see if you can get an idea of the size of the pools and the depth of the water, which you'll actually enter later on. Okay. So for human-made structures, this is kind of a big one. So this is, we want to know, if the site is developed, what human-made structures are present. So on the left, here's the screen cap again of what you'll see in the app. All of these are marked no as a default. And if you do see any of these at the site, you'll just click yes, and then a spot will open and will prompt you to take one photo. So for each of these, the spring box I already talked about, that's here. That's that concrete box near the source of the water to capture the flow. You might have a trough designed for animals to drink. Could be like this one here where there is water in it, or it could be not used anymore. So you can take a photo of that. You'll make any comments about tanks you see to store water. Down on the second row, here's an example of piping. So that's metal or plastic piping of any size that you see at the site. Any rock, stone, or concrete dams or earthen dams as well. We'll ask for a photo of that. And then any wells or signs of power sources or anything of that nature. So for all of these, you'll only upload one photo. But again, if there are more interesting things, there's spots at the beginning of the survey to add more photos. Okay, so continuing on in the human category, we'll look for other evidence of human impacts at the site. So here, you'll check any of the boxes that you do see at the site. So we'll ask about mining. So here's some photos, some tailings that you might see, or any water. You can kind of see here with a different color, kind of that reduced water quality as a result from mining. We'll ask about livestock, so signs of cows, horses, or sheep in the area. Could be heavy grazing like this bottom left photo that you see. And then on the bottom right, this is just about other signs of people, so trails, roads, campsites. So you'll just mark anything that you see, that you do see there. Okay, moving on, we'll ask about any invasive species you see. So this is what it will look like in the app, and you'll see the common names here. You'll just make a check mark if you are able to identify one of these invasive species. The photos that you see here, those are they're thumbnails on the application, but you can click on it and a larger photo will pop up. So that will help with some of your identification in the field as well. If you don't know these, not a problem at all. This is just, you know, if you are able to identify and put that down. There's also a spot for other. So if you do know a lot of invasive species and they weren't on our list, you can add those as well too. And then there's some spot to add some other invasive animals you might see. So next up, we have soil health. So on the left side here, you'll see, so we're looking for large bare areas, trampling, other things like that. Here you'll see, any incised channels, erosion, any sloughing of soil off. You can see that a little bit in these photos. So we'll be looking for indications of that. And then on the right, you'll see, we'll ask about fire. So any standing or fallen, heavily burned trees you might see, or any other indication, signs of heavy flooding or charred trees that you might see. Okay. So that's the end of the first part of the survey, which we kind of look at as the recommended part. The second part we would also love for you to do, depends on how much time you have, but if you're able, the second part would take about 10 more minutes. So the first question on there is going to be about the spring type, or the where the water is originating from. So I'm just highlighting here the 4 most common spring types in our region. And again, in our Springs 101 coffee break last week, there's a lot more detail about these and examples. So I'd highly encourage you to check that out. But here we just see the Rio Creek Spring or stream channel, Hillside Spring, Helocrene or wet meadow fen or cienega as it's often referred to in this area, and then the cliff or hanging garden. So again, there'll be thumbnails actually of these really helpful diagrams, so you can check that out while you are out. And then in this more detailed part of the survey, we'll ask again about flora and fauna, native flora and fauna. So here, first up will be any woody plants that you see. So again, if you're able to identify them, you'll mark those, and there are those thumbnails to help you. And then very similar with the wetland plants as well. So we'll ask you to mark any of those. And all of these are plants that are likely to be in wet spring ecosystems. So that's why they're here. They're in alphabetical order, so not necessarily in order of how common they are, but just to help you along. Okay, and getting to the end of the survey here, we'll have the site description. And so there, again, this is a question talking about how large is the area that was changed by the water's presence. So some of that probably came across in that representative photo that you take in the very beginning. But you can kind of see these two are good examples of you actually see where the plants and where the ecosystem changes based on how large of an area is affected. So we've put those in kind of common understandable terms, so smaller than a small living room or smaller than half a tennis court, and things that might help you when you are in the field. And you'll also answer which way does the site face and any other site description notes that you might have. In terms of cultural notes, there's a section to write out if you know of any important cultural use of this spring, the history, which again, if you've been here before, you might know, so we'd love to hear about that. And then also your opinions on if the spring looks like it's in need of any maintenance or stewardship activities, and that can help us plan any future conservation projects that we have. And then there's a spot just to put in anything else that hasn't been covered by the survey. So once you have all of that set up, you'll be good to go. Your survey will be complete. And you'll see this little check mark in the bottom right side of your screen. And once you hit that, your survey will be submitted. If there was a required question, which you can tell they have these little red asterisks that you didn't fill out, like here it looked like the surveyor forgot to put their name, so you'll be brought back to fill that out to be able to submit the survey. And often a lot of these spring sites, you won't have cell phone signal, so you may not be able to submit the survey right then. But what's really great about it is the spring seeker will save your survey, and then you can submit it safely when you get back home and have cell phone signal or internet. And you can even save multiple surveys if you do go to multiple springs in one day. So that's pretty much the overview of the survey. We have a lot of questions in there, but as you saw, they are optional, a lot of them. So depending on your time and knowledge of plants and all of that, it can range from 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, or go a little longer if you do more exploring. But yeah, we hope it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll pause now and see if we do have questions on any of that content.
Hi, Zoe. That was awesome. Yes, we have a bunch of good questions. So I'll try to group them together. Some of the questions are around what sort of water sources we're actually looking for, and more specific questions around that. And the first part of this question is, do we just want new springs, or are we interested in monitoring springs that have been visited before?
Sure. I'll let Sammy answer that again, and I think it'll be related to what we'll talk about shortly.
I think, so like Emily said in the chat, both really. So, I mean, if we haven't been to a spring at all, it's like it is pretty kind of high priority to like go out there and at least see if there's water once. But, you know, some springs stay the same all year round, while others change a lot and can dry up in the summer. So if we can get some repeat visits at some of our springs, that's also extremely valuable. So we're hoping to kind of get both things from this. So either one is good.
Okay, and then two related questions around, are we interested in cienagas and check dams? So other places where people might encounter important water sources on the landscape.
Yes, I mean, cienagas are certainly considered a type of spring. And then check dams, I guess if you're talking about like tanks that were created for like livestock and such to get water or wildlife, that would be great to go ahead and include those too, because we also care about just how water is distributed over the landscape. And if it's just little erosion control structures, that is more of a maybe, maybe not. But, you know, it can't hurt to take a little bit of data and maybe just add in the notes that, you know, this site might not be here year round, or just a little description of what it is.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a question about, is it possible to go back and add photos later from another app? Do they have to be taken live while you're doing the survey, or can you add them at the end?
It's certainly easier, but you should be able to. So while this is set up on your phone, you can also go online and get to it if you follow that link from your computer, and you should be able to download the photos into your computer. And that's tricky because I think you will have to like log in and create a free ArcGIS online account to be able to access it from your computer. But I think it is possible. You can check in more with us about how exactly to do that if that's what you'd like to do.
And I think without using the computer on your phone, so there was that option to use that camera button or the files. So if someone else took it on their phone, someone you were with, and then they text them or email them to you, you can save them on your phone and then go through the files under that.
That's a great point.
You can definitely edit the survey once you get home before you submit.
Okay, so just another technical question. Is it possible to change or add in the location coordinates later if for some reason the GPS on the phone wasn't working?
Yes, I originally made it, so I don't think it'll allow you to type in the coordinates, but you should be able to go drop a pin later. We originally made that question mandatory because we wanted to make sure to get a location, but then we realized if there were issues with it or your phone GPS wasn't working for some reason, then you couldn't save the survey at all. So you should be able to go back and edit that before you submit it when you're back in self-service, or even after you submit it, you can edit it and resubmit the survey.
Yeah.
But
And
just to reiterate something that Zoe said, even if you don't have cell service, if you have a GPS-based tablet or your cell phone, its GPS is always working. So the accuracy may go down in certain locations, but it actually is still working regardless of your cellular service connectivity.
yes, definitely. And I was just going to say too, what Sammy mentioned is there's a lot of spots at the end to type any notes to us. And so that can be about the site or, you know, I don't think this coordinate was right or something, and I'll follow up with you later. And then you could just, you know, email us or communicate in that way.
Great. Okay, more questions. One, and there's been some discussion about this on the chat, but how to get more information about the plants specifically for folks that are looking for additional resources. It was just mentioned, what other resources do we recommend? And it was brought up on chat about iNaturalist Seek app, which uses visual recognition to help you at least get down closer to an identification. Often it can identify a family or even to the genus level, even if it doesn't know the species. So we do recommend Seek, and we have a link to that on our website. Are there any other resources that you want to highlight, Zoe?
Yeah, well, in the next section, when I talk about some other training materials, we do have photo galleries of these common plants on our website, which are similar to those small thumbnails in the app, but it might help to, before you go out, kind of look at those, and then you can read more about them on different pages online. But definitely recommend Seek for when you're in the field. I use Seek all the time.
Okay, and then there was a question about the seasonality of the survey. Are we only interested in summer, or what are your thoughts on when to do the survey? Sam, you want to take that?
Sure. So summer is great because it tends to be the driest time of year for spring. So if you have water, then you know it might be pretty reliable spring. But we definitely, when our traditional Adopt a Spring program, we've had people go and visit a spring once every season. So we get the whole picture throughout the year. So if people fill in these sites at different seasons, that would be really useful.
Great, okay. And then a couple more questions. One is, how can people who are just doing this for the first time, are there going to be opportunities for them to shadow someone who's more knowledgeable, has done these surveys before, and what should volunteers do if they'd like to go out to the field with a staff member or a more experienced volunteer?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
So we're working on setting up, trying to like set up maybe one field day a week with staff people, and we'll want to keep it to probably 1 or 2 volunteers maybe for each of those right now while the whole pandemic thing is happening. But yeah, so that'll give people an opportunity to come out with us once, kind of see how it works, ask questions when they're trying it out, yeah, and then hopefully we'll have that more going on into the future. And also, you know, we can think about maybe how to try to help you guys connect with each other. So maybe just more experienced volunteers can get matched up with newer ones. So we'll work on a system to do that.
Okay, great. Could you mention a little bit about how the closure of Mount Lemmon because of the Bighorn fire is affecting our Springs program, Sammy?
Okay, so mostly it's redirecting it for now. So the Push Ridge Wilderness was going to be one of the areas that we try to do spring surveys in this summer, but that's probably not going to happen unless we get some special permissions to go in there, and it's still going to be more dangerous to go in there with like the recent, you know, potential for debris flows and things like that from the fire. But we're also even more interested to get in there to see how fire is impacting these springs. So we'll be talking to the Forest Service to see if we can maybe start going in the next couple months. But instead of the Push Ridge area, we've been focusing on the Santa Ritas and the Huachucas and a little bit of the Rincon Mountains right now.
Okay, great. And with that, we've got one more question that I think transitions us into the next section of our talk anyway, but a little bit more about what are priority springs to measure and how volunteers can get information about where the highest priority places are to go.
Yes, I guess, yeah, maybe we'll hold that, like we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It's coming.
That's coming very soon. Before that, I'm just going to review the different training resources we have for everyone. So we have a Spring Seeker page. So on our website, we've done some redesign, as Emily mentioned. So you'll just go to skyislandalliance.org, and then under Protecting Water, we have the Spring Seeker page. My screen cap didn't capture it, but you can scroll. It keeps going for a while with links to all of these different resources we're mentioning. So a few that I wanted to highlight. First, we have this user guide. So this is basically a short, kind of what we talked about today, but a heavy focus on the downloading, getting the app, getting started before you go in the field. And it's basically, you'll just click on the first one, and then there's this little arrow that you'll click through. And so you can use this, with your phone in front of you to kind of guide you getting that ready later today or this weekend or whenever you're ready to go out. So that's the user manual. And then we have this field manual with step-by-step instructions. So this is a downloadable PDF. So you can, a few options here. You can either download it to your computer and review it before you go out. You could actually download it to your phone or tablet and save it as a PDF on there so you can reference it in the field. Or an old school option, you can print it and take it to the field, which is probably what I'd recommend. But it basically, it's similar to what we talked about today in that user guide, but it goes into a lot more detail with examples of, for example, the human-made structures that might differ a lot, or there can be a big variety in spring boxes, for example. So you'll see some different example photos of all of those. And it also includes some larger photos of from the photo gallery, so of those different species that will help you while you're out. So I'd recommend, printing and taking, or somehow taking that to the field manual. It's about 20 pages or so, but it's mostly photos. And then over here, just wanted to highlight these photo galleries that we have. So the wetland plants, the woody plants, invasive species. These are kind of click through as well. So it's almost like a refresher just to go through before you go out, kind of like a flashcard, but there's no test sort of thing. So we have those, and then we'll also have today's coffee break recorded as well, so you can check that out again. And then on our page, we have links to Seek by iNaturalist that was mentioned, and a few other navigating apps that Sammy will talk about. So there's a lot of resources on our Spring Seeker page. So I'll pause there. Do we have any questions about these different resources?
Well, there was a question that I did address in the chat, but just so everyone knows, there's a question about how we could be helping the Forest Service with watershed restoration following the Bighorn fire. They are in the very beginning of planning their response to the Bighorn fire themselves. Skyland Alliance has already reached out to them, and we're in communication about when we can begin to go in and do post-fire spring surveys in the affected areas, and we will be working on developing a stewardship and restoration program with them in the months ahead. But they're still working on dealing with the fire because it's not quite out yet. So this is going to be a long-term project for us, but they're really happy to have our organization and our community support. The other question was about, does this project have an end date, or is it going to be ongoing? Sammy, could you answer that one?
Yes, I wasn't sure if you were going to go for it or it's going to be ongoing. Like, we've been collecting springs data for 8 years, and we want to keep collecting it and find out, more about springs in the region that we don't know about, and get a more complete picture of springs that we do know about. And then we covered this a little bit, and I think in our webinar last week, but we'll be pulling this data into our spring prioritization tool to help us decide where to go do stewardship projects and different kinds of protection actions for springs too. So it'll be a whole pipeline of work, and this is just the first step.
And I'll just add, we're really excited to have all of you on board because it means we can get to more springs in areas that we haven't been or wouldn't have the capacity to go to. So it's really exciting to be able to get all of this data.
Okay, that looks like that's it for questions at this point.
Okay, perfect. Well, the next section we're going to move on to is choosing your spring. Now that you're all ready to go, how are you going to decide which spring to go to? So I'm going to pass this to Sammy.
I'm just gonna.
I'll have you.
Sorry, it's thinking. There we go. All right, so choosing your spring. So as some of you have seen, we already have this map up on the website. And so this is a kind of compiled map of all the springs and water sources that I could find for our region. And the darker blue points are the springs, and the lighter blue points are other water sources that are still valuable to gather information at. And then the other thing that's on this map is land ownership. And so you can see like the different colors correspond to different land ownership. And, you know, you should always still check where you're going, but you can use this as a general guide to make sure, you know, you have permission to be on those lands you're going to go exploring on. And then the other part that answers a question that we just had in the chat about are these all the sites that we can go to. You can add data for all these springs, but also if you find any other spring or water source out there, you can create a new point. So you can still take data for places that aren't on the map. But you should be able to, if you go to the website, you can click and zoom and move around. So I'll just show, so say you're going out, or we're imagining the main use for this is going to be you want to go out hiking anyway, and you're going to take the app with you and collect data if you're out there seeing a spring or if you're going to be near a spring. So imagine the scenario where you're planning to go down to Ramsey Canyon in the Huachucas for the weekend and exploring around there. So you can zoom into that area on the map, and you can see, so the green is the Forest Service lands. You can see the Fort Huachuca kind of in that pink color, and then the private lands are red, state lands are blue. There's a little bit of state land there. And you can see there's a couple springs up here in Ramsey Canyon. So if you want to, now that you're zoomed in closer and you want to maybe see the trails and things like that, if you click on the base map button, up on the upper left, it'll give you a bunch of different maps that you can show underneath that. So I like to click on the USA Topo Maps. So here I clicked on USA Topo Maps. I switched to the Topo Map view. I turned off the land management because I know I'm going to be on the forest. So now it's a more zoomed in view of Ramsey Canyon. And there's a spring over here. If you click on the spring itself, a little pop-up will come up and you can see the site ID number, which is what we talked about earlier. So that helps us know, you know, you're at this Overlook Spring, not Overlook Spring somewhere else. Or, so you'd write down the site ID number. It also has the latitude and the longitude. And then you can look, and you know, there's other springs in the area too that you could go to if you wanted. And then, so now you like have that information. So this is like when you're planning ahead of time. You can also look this up afterwards and find out, like, you know, you stopped at this spring and you go look it up on the map and there's the site ID and you can go back and put it in the survey form. But you know, say you're planning ahead of time. So our survey thing doesn't really tell you how to get to a spring. So there's a lot of different apps and things like that available for your phone, or you can use paper maps, of course. One that we like to use is called Gaia GPS, and you can actually add a waypoint to it. So I clicked a button, this little plus button on it, to add a waypoint, and you can type in the name and the latitude and the longitude. It'll save the point right there. So that's one way that you can take it from that online map to a map that you can use to navigate out in the field. But there's a lot of different resources here. You know, we don't have all of Avenza Maps is also useful. You can download topographic maps for all the areas. All Trails is another app. And there's a number of other ones. So, you know, kind of, yeah, that might just require some research to find the best way to navigate to a spring. But we have these links to these things on our website also. So let me just, and so the other thing I wanted to cover is just a little bit of safety stuff. So the main thing, like one of the big things is don't enter private or tribal lands unless you have permission from the landowners to be there and to collect survey data there, and that they know what you're doing and everything. If it's your own lands and you want to collect data at a spring and share it, that's wonderful. And you can contact us if you want to keep that information. If you want to make it available to us, but not available to the general public. And then make sure you have the proper permit. You know, if you're out recreating, there's some National Forest Service lands like Madera Canyon where you should have a permit. Of course, being on national park lands, BLM lands sometimes like Aravaipa Canyon Wilderness requires a permit, and actually state lands are not regular public lands, and you should have a recreation permit that you can get online for only $15 to be able to go on state lands. So just kind of make sure that you're following all the rules and regulations of the area. And the another really important thing is to stay within your comfort zone. So we don't want this to be a reason that you go do some crazy off-trail adventure that you've never done. If you're used to stay on trails, stay on trails. The most important thing, while gathering data about spring is great, the most important thing is you coming home safe. So stay safe, turn around if you are getting uncomfortable or something doesn't feel good to you. And we have more safety information on the website too that we've added. So you can check out the link on our Spring Seeker page there. And I think, yeah. And then, so next week we're gonna have, next Monday evening, I'm gonna do a Wilderness Springs training so you can learn more about how to join our specific Wilderness Springs project. And maybe you can get out and just try this at a spring or a pond near you this weekend if you'd like, so you can we can answer more questions about that there. But yeah, I'll turn it back over to Zoe or Emily. Oh.
Great, thank you, Sammy. So we encourage you to visit our website for all of these resources and to play around with the map to explore potential springs and areas that you're interested in visiting. We're having questions come up about redundancy of checking springs. So is it okay for people to visit one that's already surveyed, or should we avoid this? I'll toss that question to you, Sammy.
So we do want to avoid over visiting springs and causing trampling and trails and things like that. So one thing that we'll work on adding to the website that's not on there right now is just when the most recent visit was to the spring and how many visits it has. So if it has some recent visits and in the same season and everything, I would avoid it. But it like most of our springs, that's not going to be the case for right now. So yeah, that's something we'll work on adding, but you don't have to worry too much about it yet.
Okay. There's also been a comment made that some volunteers that are using Flow 365 to monitor river conditions. And are those data that you want also populated in this, Sammy?
I don't think so. That's one I don't know about yet, so I'll look that up. But it is, that is one, now this is like an app you can add if you find like a spring when you're out doing river surveys, and go ahead and collect a little bit of data for us too. So yeah.
We do have partnerships with other groups that are doing wet-dry mapping and doing other kinds of monitoring. And I know we are readily sharing data with one another. So I would say if you are submitting to another project, that's probably sufficient. And we can definitely be combining all of these data. Certainly for the Santa Cruz watershed, we're working with Watershed Management Group and pulling together a combination of both springs data and river mapping, stream mapping together into a unified plan. There was a question that came up about areas of our primary interest. Are we mainly interested in Coronado National Forest or also Saguaro National Park and other places. So maybe you could address that, Sammy, and also share how people can get in touch with you if they want more specific guidance about where to go.
Yeah, so we're definitely generally interested in the whole region. Right now we're talking about some of the Coronado National Forest stuff and the wilderness things because we have a specific grant to survey springs on National Forest wilderness areas that lasts through the end of this year. So we have a little bit of extra focus on those, but any springs are going to be really useful. And we definitely want to know about springs throughout the whole region.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then there was a general question about how to increase skills for orienteering. So how to find your way around in wilderness or other wild areas. Any good resources that our staff or maybe other folks on the webinar might have to recommend?
I don't know of any specifically. I know they're often in the past, you know, when we're not in a pandemic, there are often different orienteering courses you could take. I wouldn't recommend diving into that right now, unless there are some of those resources. I don't know, do Zoe or some people are sharing some of that chat too?
Yeah, it sounds like REI has resources, and it sounds like one of our someone on here, Kathy, actually teaches orienteering to kids. That's great. So we can look for some resources and add them to our resource page for Spring Seeker if we find some good references. So we'll follow up on that.
I'd say the main thing is don't try it yourself without an experienced person with you. We don't want to get anybody hurt or lost.
Also, I would just add, I mean, some of these springs are in wilderness areas or more remote, but there's a lot of springs that we went to test this app that are on clearly marked trails, like in Madera Canyon. We did a lot, we went to a lot of springs there. So I think a lot of them can also be found, you know, just following the trail. So it's not necessarily required.
Okay, great. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and call this part of the webinar end that. So thank you everyone for tuning in and listening in. And we're happy our staff will stay on if you want to try downloading Survey 123, opening the survey, and if you have any specific technical questions that you're having as you try to get this loaded, we're happy to do that. So just a really warm thank you to Zoe and Sammy for creating this virtual opportunity for us to learn about Spring Seeker and to have this great mobile app now for all of us to be collecting important water data while we're out hiking. I think all of us feel so excited to have something we contribute while we go and enjoy nature. So thank you so much for creating this project.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're welcome to sign off if you feel like you already have a handle on how to get the app on your phone and if you don't have further questions. And I'm going to unmute folks. So if you actually want to speak or say anything, you're welcome to. We still have more than 50 people on the webinar, so we'll see how that goes. Feel free to continue to use the chat as well.
Perfect. And I want to say, so I can walk through the download. So if folks want to make sure they have that phone or tablet that they do want to take to the field ready, or have a minute to go grab that, we can give a minute for that as well.
And I just want to say, seeing all the comments and questions and all your enthusiasm is so exciting for us. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Any more questions, Emily, or I can move on to downloading?
There's a question that's coming in about, they're coming in fast, quickly now. Is there a trick to the login info? So I imagine this is referring to when you go to Survey 123, and do you need to have a login?
Great question. So you don't need to log in. Maybe I'll go through these next few slides, which just talk through those few steps in detail, and people can follow along if they want, because we will touch on that. Does that sound good? Or are there more questions?
So let me just see, give me a moment just to read what's coming up.
But you don't need a login. That's the short answer.
Don't need a login. Yeah. It looks like some folks have been answering that question. Yeah, so you don't have to register I was able to do it without logging in. Once I just opened the survey app, it just went right there. Okay, so folks are feeling stuck on the login screen. So maybe you can
Okay.
just walk through that.
Sounds good. So yeah, I'll just walk through. And again, this is all on the website in that user guide. But that step 1 is downloading Survey 123. So sounds like people are doing that if they're trying to log in. So that's just in the App Store. Download that. You might have to give permission depending on your security settings or thumbprint. So sounds like people are at that step. And then so probably people are here. So once it's downloaded, you'll see it come up on your home screen. The whole icon will be complete. So just tap on that to open Survey 123. And then it will allow you, if it's okay if the app accesses your location. This is pretty important. One of the most important key data points for us is the location of the spring. So definitely allow it. I usually do allow while using app. If you do it allow once, you'll have to keep refreshing that every time. So I would recommend the allow while using app. And then, as we said, this survey is public, so you're not required to create that account or sign in. So this is probably, I think, where people are running into issues. So actually now, because we just have the app, we don't have the survey yet. So you can actually close out of the app. So you don't need to continue on with the login. You can close out of Survey 123. And then, as Emily mentioned, the next step is getting the Spring Seeker survey. So for this, we have the link here, sorry, you can either type it into a browser on your Google Chrome or Internet Explorer on your cell phone, or from your cell phone or tablet, you can go to our Spring Seeker page and then click on this link, but not from your computer, on the phone. So I'll give a minute for that, and that will bring you to our actual survey page that you'll then choose that bottom option, open in the Survey 123 field app. So I'll pause here and then see if we're getting some success.
I just pasted this web address that Zoe's showing through the Zoom into the chat, so you can either copy that or copy and paste it somehow. I just wanted to reiterate that what Zoe is saying about when you leave the Survey 123 app from the login window and go and get the survey, you're going to bypass all the login. So you can just completely ignore where it says login, go find the survey, open it up, and you'll just be right inside Survey 123 without ever needing to log in.
Thanks, exactly. So yeah, in the chat, if people want to say if they're having success or not, we can monitor that.
So there's one question, like we talked about earlier, maybe Sammy, you can help with this, just how to add photos after the fact. Do you need to have an ArcGIS account, or if you haven't submitted, can you just go back and edit your survey? If you could just reiterate the answer to that question.
Yeah, okay, so there's two options here. If you really don't want to get an ArcGIS Online account, you would just do the survey on the phone, and then you would want to, maybe would take your photos with your camera or something, upload them to your PC, but you'd need to need to eventually get those photos from your PC back onto your phone, and then you can add them like from the folder icon on your phone. That's a little bit roundabout. So the easiest way would be to go ahead and sign up for a free ArcGIS Online account, use that when you're using the Spring Seeker on your phone, do your survey, go ahead and submit it, and then you would go onto your computer where you have your photos and log in using your same login information, and then reopen you can go back in on the Survey 123 website and add your photos into your survey and resubmit them. You just need to be logged into both of them for it to be able to like link those two together, basically. But yeah, I'm happy to like talk you through that on the phone or something too, if that helps later on.
Okay, there was a question about how will this work in the field without cell service? So I typed an answer, but maybe Sammy, if you could just describe how it will work. And what are they need to do? But one of you before
I think
you
Zoe can get this one. if
Sure,
that's fine with you, Zoe.
Yeah, so it will work great because when you're in the field, like Emily mentioned, the location is going to be taken care of just from that GPS part of your phone. So it's able to get those fixes and everything. So location is taken care of, but it's true, you won't be able to submit the survey until you're back home or somewhere with cell phone signal or internet. But what'll happen is the complete survey will just save in your, it's called the outbox. And then when you get back home, you can open survey 1, 2, 3, and you'll see outbox if you did 1 completed survey or 2 or 3 if it was multiple. And then you'll click on that and then you can submit it. And I think that's what Sammy was alluding to back when you are home. You can then edit and add more photos if you were with a friend who took those photos. And that can be all done from your phone if you don't want to do the account, which is totally fine. So your friend could text you the photos and then you can save them on your phone and add them in.
And then there's a question here about if the app caches maps. And it is possible, this app that we're using is really survey form based. It is possible to add a base map, but it's kind of complicated. So I've been trying, but haven't quite succeeded and learned how to do that yet. I did manage to create a base map that you can use in another ArcGIS app, but basically for both of these you have to have an account. So really the simplest thing to do now is just use an app that's made for navigating around out while you're hiking or exploring, and add the spring. If you're trying to go to a certain spring, add that as a waypoint in there. And so just kind of use a whole separate thing, and then just use this for taking the data on the spring. So a little bit annoying, but it seems to be the best solution for now.
And we'll touch more on that on Monday too, when we're talking about actually navigating to the springs. So I'm just going to go to this final slide here. So I'm wondering, yeah, if people were able to download the survey, as Emily said, it probably brought you right into the Spring Seeker survey. Since you're obviously not in the field right now, you don't need to exit. You can exit out of there and you can discard the survey. And then just to make sure it's saved so you are ready when you go out to the field, in your Spring Seeker now, in the app, you should see the Spring Seeker under My Surveys. So once you exit out of that, the survey that it opened automatically.
Great. There's a question about how we are going to check entries for accuracy before we use the data or share with the Spring Stewardship Institute.
Yes, we have we're going to have a whole process for bringing that data in and then converting that into data that we'll use ourselves directly or upload to the Spring Stewardship Institute, which has a database of springs across the world. So yeah, we'll have a workflow through that. And that's part of what the photos are, is to help us double check impacts and things like that too. And yeah, so we have a plan for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And then someone is just reminding everybody that they experienced the survey having an update. And so Zoe, maybe if you could just remind people best practice before going out to the field to make sure they've got the right survey.
Well, I'm glad you're already getting an update. But yeah, so we do expect we will have updates as we get this first data and need to change things or anything like that. So before you go to the field, you'll always want to open survey 1, 2, 3, and first of all, make sure the survey's in there. So that's the screen I'm sharing right now. You should see it under My Surveys. And then you might have something that says there is an update. Would you like to go ahead and update? And please always check and say yes when you see that update.
Okay, and then there's a question about, can you do multiple surveys without cell connection? Can it save multiple separate survey entries without a problem?
Yes.
Okay, great.
You just click, you'll click the check mark button at the bottom, and it'll ask you something, and then it'll save it in your outbox, and then you can just click the collect button that you can see there again and start a new survey.
But that's a great question, because if you are out for a whole day or even a half a day and you get to multiple ones, that is going to be something you're going to want to do. And then you'll just get home and make sure you go into your outbox and then submit.
I'm going to type in the Spring Stewardship Institute's website into the chat just so people can check it out too, because that's a great resource about springs in general and getting more in-depth training on surveying springs.
Terrific. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. We're so excited that all of you care about springs in the Sky Island region. We're going to be doing a tremendous amount of survey work going forward, both in Arizona and, as Zoe said in the beginning, in Sonora, Mexico as well. We currently have 4 interns that are working with us in Sonora, and they've been doing spring surveys using the Spanish version of our app. So we're really excited to say that this is definitely binational, and the connection with the Spring Stewardship Institute and their Springs Online database is, as Kathy pointed out online, making this really a worldwide project, which is super exciting. We'll be using all of these data, incorporating them into our spring prioritization tool to help us understand Sky Island Alliance, where we want to be doing stewardship and conservation work going forward, setting those priorities. So all of your data really do count and help the Forest Service validate their water rights if you're working on Forest Service land. So I hope you're inspired and excited. Please be in touch with us if you have additional questions or feedback on this training. This was the first virtual training that we've done of this kind. So please do let us know how this is going for you. And we would love to answer your questions, go out to the field with you. So please stay in touch.